I'm here with Chris Powell, who's the Secretary-Treasurer of the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, which has done so much for the gold market in terms of disclosures, education, and all types of other things over the past 10 years. I think it's probably been one of the most important and biggest forces in the gold market to help people understand what's really going on behind the scenes. It's a pleasure to speak with you, Chris.
Oh, and with you, James.
You're going to be talking at the Cheviot Sound Money Conference. Can you give us a little bit of flavor as to what the theme of your presentation is going to be?
Yes, I want to review a lot of the documentation that GATA has collected over the years showing either a Western central bank interest in manipulating the gold market or plans to manipulate the gold market and other evidence that this manipulation has taken place. This is official documentation, not hypothesis or speculation or conspiracy theory or anything like that. And then I want to explain what GATA is doing right now with legal action to show this surreptitious manipulation and review evidence that other central banks are in on it, and that the financial press is just so negligent in covering the gold market.
Yeah, I agree. But let me get back up a little bit here so we can establish some definitions. Manipulation is a hot word. Some people might react differently than the way you and I view the word manipulation. How do you define that term? How do you use it when you talk about manipulation of the gold market? Are we talking just about government intervention, or is there something more beyond that?
Well, I think the manipulation is largely a government operation, but it's undertaken usually now through intermediaries, through investment houses operating largely for the U.S. government. By manipulation, I mean generally suppression of the price of gold, or making sure that a real free market does not develop in the monetary metals, and preventing free markets in the monetary metals, I will show, has been U.S. government policy going back for many decades, if you simply will look at the archived records, which are in the public domain.
This is, of course, music to my ears, because you've published so much of my stuff over the past 10 years. But just to play devil's advocate a little bit here, why would the government want to keep the gold price capped? Why do they want to prevent a free market in gold? Because
gold, and to a lesser extent silver, are competitive currencies. And because, as Lawrence Summers, when he was a professor of economics at Harvard, wrote in an academic paper in the Journal of Political Economy in 1988, the price of gold is an enormous determinant, not only of the value of currencies, but of the level of interest rates and the value of government bonds. Gold is a very small market. If gold was just another commodity like cotton or soybeans, government would not care so much about it. Government is determined to protect the government bond market and to suppress interest rates, and that's why the governments, particularly the United States, are manipulating the gold market, because gold determines interest rates and the value of government bonds.
As some say, gold is the canary in the monetary coal mine. Rising gold price means that things are not well with the currency, and therefore governments and central banks are doing a poor job in managing that currency relative to its natural competitor.
Yes, and this is not the only rigging of data or market information. We see it, the same kind of rigging in the inflation data that's produced by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You've written often about the rigging of the money supply data, or the withdrawal from publication of the M3 data. This is government massaging the information that reaches the public so that the public gets a false impression.
To what end? What does government expect? And do they expect that by massaging this information they can do that forever?
I think so. I mean, this is government power. This is central bank power. If gold is the great discipliner of governments, it has the power to eviscerate currencies and eviscerate government bonds. Governments learned long ago that either gold would be their master or they would be gold's master. One of the documents that GATA has published is is a CIA memo from the 1960s outlining a plan by which the government, it says, will remain the masters of gold. Gold is something that the market can participate through, that individuals can participate through, and that can get out of control. Either government's going to have the power or the people and the markets are going to have the power. And there's no way the government wants the markets and the people to have the power.
Yeah, I tend to believe that markets and people in the end are always much bigger than any government or group of governments. Do you share that view, or you're taking a more pessimistic viewpoint?
I think the issue is yet to be determined, James.
So you're open-minded as to whether we're going to go that way or not?
We're doing our best to liberate planet Earth.
I like the way you put that. Okay, let's go back to some of the specifics that GATA is doing. Let's talk first about the Freedom of Information Act, which has been, that's been about, what, a 2 or 3 year effort now?
Well, yes, we've been plotting to get documents out of the Fed and the Treasury Department about gold. A couple of years ago, we made a very detailed Freedom of Information request to the Federal Reserve for access to its gold records, particularly to its records of gold swaps. On September 17, 2009, our lawyer, William Olson of Vienna, Virginia, received a very interesting letter from Kevin M. Warsh, who's a member of the Fed's Board of Governors. Warsh was acting as a sort of a hearing officer in the internal Fed appeal of our denial of access to the Fed's gold information. And Warsh upheld the denial of the information to us, but on the 3rd page of the letter he said something very interesting. He revealed that the Fed has gold swap arrangements with foreign banks and that these arrangements must remain secret and they were properly withheld from us. Now, I construed this as a contemporaneous admission that the Fed, even now in the present, not just these historical documents that we've compiled over the years, but right now in the present, at least as of September 17, 2009, the Federal Reserve is at least contemplating tampering with the gold market surreptitiously through these gold swap arrangements. Now, Warsh's letter did not say that the Fed had implemented any of these arrangements. His letter said simply that the Fed has these gold swap arrangements with foreign banks. I take that as an admission that the Fed is surreptitiously at least contemplating being in the gold market now, very likely is in the gold market and has been for quite some time. Now, we brought suit against the Fed under the Freedom of Information Act. We brought the suit in U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia on December 31st, 2009. And the other day we won a small, but I was hoping significant ruling from the judge. The Fed had identified some records that it felt was responsive to our request, but did not want to present them to us or heavily redacted them. The Fed presented a list of these documents to the court on something that's in legal jargon called a Vaughan index of the documents. We asked the judge to order the Fed to produce these documents in their complete nature without redaction so that she could review them privately and determine whether the Fed's claim of exemption for them from the Free Information Act was valid. The judge granted our motion against the Fed's objection a couple of weeks ago, and the Fed produced the documents to the judge, and we're waiting to see what the judge says about the releasability of the documents. The case could still go either way. The Fed has got a motion in for summary judgment against us. We have another motion before the court to have the court order the Fed to answer 25 interrogatories from our lawyer about the Fed's activity in the gold market. We think we can show how the Fed has made the most inadequate search of its gold records. I mean, we have collected gold-related records from Federal Reserve internet sites and things like that that the Fed apparently has not even located. The Fed is not trying to be comprehensive in producing information to the court here, but we've asked the judge additionally to let us interrogate the Fed with 25 questions about its gold records. If the judge grants that motion, I think the Fed will be in a lot of difficulty regarding the gold price suppression scheme.
What is the timetable? First of all, with regard to the judge reviewing the documents, when do you expect to hear that? And what about the request to have the 25 questions?
It's entirely up to the Judge, James. There could be action this week, or it could take months. There's nothing for us to do but wait now.
There's no indication as to when the judge is going to
No.
rule.
And, you know, it's really entirely up to her. There's some reason for hope insofar as, one, she did grant one of our motions against the Fed. The Fed has been trying to dismiss this case on various grounds with many briefs over the last year and has not yet succeeded in doing that. And the judge in a recent case involving the Securities and Exchange Commission, another case, expressed great skepticism of the government's attempt to make a very lenient settlement with one of the big investment banks. So we think there's some evidence anyway that the judge is capable of holding the U.S. government to account.
And you're optimistic you're going to get a fair hearing, in other words?
Well, if we...
Time will tell.
Yeah, I don't know, James. I guess I have to be optimistic in thinking that there are honest judges in the system somewhere and that the law means what it says, and that when President Obama says he wants the government to be much more transparent and comply with the Free Information Act, that there might be an outside chance that he means what he says. And if that
the Federal Reserve can't act behind closed doors.
Well, it's acting behind closed doors, and it's very unclear whether the president meant this openness kick to apply to the Federal Reserve. But yeah, if these approaches don't work, we'll try something else.
Yeah, it's one of the things I admire about GATA and you and Bill Murphy, that you just keep on plugging away. And every month, every week, every few months, there's always something new happening and developing to provide more education and information about the gold market, which I think is invaluable. Let me ask you, why are you focusing on the Fed? What about the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the Treasury itself, maybe other elements of government? Are they important too?
Yes, definitely. The problem with the Exchange Stabilization Fund, James, it was established by the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, and everything I've heard from the lawyers says that the ESF is simply unaccountable under the law, that it answers only to the Treasury Secretary and to the President and to no other officer of the government. Now, the ESF does publish an annual report, and it occasionally does reply to inquiries from Congress, but it cannot be compelled to answer under the law.
It's a law unto itself?
Pretty much so, yes. And it was established to rig the gold market. If you read the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, which established the Exchange Stabilization Fund, you find that the Gold Reserve Act of 1934 gives the ESF the authority to trade in what it calls hypothecations in gold. Well, we construe that to be, futures, options, derivatives, paper gold, anything like that. Now, if the U.S. government was not contemplating intervening surreptitiously in the gold market, there'd be no need for that provision of the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, and no need to give the Exchange Stabilization Fund the authority to trade in gold.
Very interesting. Let's move on. I want to talk to you about what's happening in Germany. One of the beauties of GATA is that it's really a global organization that's been empowered by the internet in terms of disseminating information throughout the world. And I know that there are GATA contingents in various countries around the world also trying to get more transparency in the gold market, working with governments and quasi-government agencies to get them to disclose information as to what they're doing in terms of their gold activities. Can you explain a little bit about what's going on in Germany?
Yes. When we had so much trouble getting the Federal Reserve to explain what it was doing with gold swaps. I got into a discussion with our friend, the German freelance journalist Lars Schall, who has written very often on gold topics, and I suggested to him, hey, you're German, why don't you see if you can't get an answer out of the Bundesbank that I can't get out of the Federal Reserve in the United States. Why not ask the Bundesbank, who I think has always been a prime suspect in the gold price suppression scheme, given the U.S. occupation, military occupation of Germany after the war. Why not ask the Bundesbank the equivalent question to the question we're trying to ask the Fed in the United States? That is, ask the Bundesbank, are you engaged in any gold swap agreements with any agency of the United States government? Well, Lars did put that question to the Bundesbank and 12 other questions, and he got a very interesting, very quick reply, which was a brush off, but I think it was a very telling brush off. And I brought the text here. The Bundesbank wrote back to Lars, who asked them about, do you have any gold swaps with the United States?
Go ahead and read it.
In managing foreign reserves, the Bundesbank fulfills one of its mandated tasks as an integral part of the European system of central banks. We trust you will understand that we are not able to divulge any further information regarding this activity, particularly with respect to the confidential nature of information about where gold holdings are kept. We are unable to go into any greater detail concerning exact locations and the quantities stored at each of these. Likewise, owing to the strategic nature of the activity, we are not at liberty to provide you with more detailed information about gold transactions. Well, at least the Bundesbank there says that it is involved in strategic gold activities that it doesn't want the world to know about. That, I believe, is as much an admission from the Bundesbank as we received from the Fed in Kevin Warsh's letter, that the Bundesbank is surreptitiously tampering with the gold market, and the world must not be permitted to know about this. I think we have contemporaneous admissions from the Federal Reserve, and thanks to Lars Schall now from the Bundesbank, that both the German and United States central banks are surreptitiously manipulating the gold market.
Yeah, or the U.S. central bank is using the German central bank's gold reserves for that purpose.
Right, but nevertheless, the Bundesbank would be the participant in that scheme.
And the other similarity, of course, is that the Bundesbank is also operating behind closed doors, unwilling to add any transparency to the gold market.
Yes, and you know, the Bundesbank will not even tell the German people where the German gold is, though a previous statement obtained from the Bundesbank by GATA consultant Rob Kirby disclosed or got an admission from the Bundesbank that very much of the German gold is outside Germany. Max Kaiser, who is the international journalist who will be at the Cheviot conference tomorrow, also got a similar admission from the Bundesbank that much of the German gold is outside Germany. The letter from, or the email that Rob Kirby got from the Bundesbank said much of the German gold is at gold trading centers, was the phrase the Bundesbank used. Well, if you're not trading gold, why are you keeping your gold at gold trading centers?
Yeah, and well, it ties into the comment about strategic activity. You know, the implication, of course, being is that the gold is in play for the purpose of, you know, capping the gold price in order to make the dollar look worthy of being the world's reserve currency, when in fact we know that it doesn't have the capability to hold that esteemed position any longer.
And all this is, you know, this is public record. These are public statements by central banks out in the open. This gold story is probably the most compelling story in financial journalism in the world today. It's not hard to get. The records are out there. We've compiled many of them. You can always call up a central bank and ask an embarrassing question and get a central banker to tell you to, you know, drop dead, which, you know, ought to at least arouse a little curiosity. But very few people will do it. I've been nudging about 15 international journalists about this over the last year. Every time something happens, I send them each an individual note calling attention to it and suggesting that they might want to look into it. One of the things I ask them to do is to call the Federal Reserve and ask about its gold swap arrangements with foreign banks, and why do these things have to be secret, and what's the purpose of them? I have not really succeeded in getting anybody, as far as I know, to pose that question officially yet. However, a reporter for a major news organization who had contacted me about GATA's work some months ago was nudged enough by me that on her own, without getting any approval from her editor to write a story about gold, she just did get curious. And she called up the Fed's Public Information Office one day and asked about the gold swap arrangements. And she called me back to say that the Fed's Public Information Office said, oh, we never talk about those things. Now, unfortunately, her own news agency doesn't report about those things either. But just on her own, out of curiosity, she did call them up and asked the Fed, what are these gold swap things about? And the Fed refused to answer.
It's good to show people using initiative like that to try to get to the truth.
But you know, whenever there is a gold story involving central banks, like a few months ago, the mysterious gold swaps involving the Bank for International Settlements, the biggest gold swap in history, something like 346 tons, was disclosed by a financial letter writer who was going through the footnotes of the BIS's most recent annual report. It wasn't, you know, regular financial journalists that came up with this, but a financial letter writer came up with it. Then it leached out into regular journalism. But all the regular mainstream journalists, nobody called up the Bank for International Settlements or the other central banks to ask what this was about. They immediately called up, you know, gold market analysts and other financial writers to see if they could speculate about what it was. I mean, nobody in financial journalism about gold or central banking goes to the source because it's simply assumed that central banking is rightfully conducted in private, and you will never rightfully get an answer out of a central bank about anything.
Yeah, I would like to change that paradigm. And as you know, going back to the GATA conference in Dawson City in August 2005, I made the point that the barbarous relic is not the gold standard in Keynes' term, but in fact the barbarous relic is central banking because of the interventions and the things that they do to thwart the market process and to move away from sound money to the fiat currency that they today create. Let's go back to you know, GATA and the different things that you've done. Obviously, you've got your plate full with what you're already doing with the Freedom of Information Act and also what's happening in Germany and some of the other initiatives. What about the renewed calls for auditing the U.S. gold reserve? Is this something that GATA is going to wrap its arms around?
Well, Ron Paul did get legislation passed last year for a one-time audit of the Fed.
I'm talking about the gold reserve.
Right.
Now.
Whether this will encompass the gold reserve is unclear to me. When I'm back in the United States in a few days, one thing that I should do on behalf of GATA is get in touch with Representative Paul and see if he can't press this, not only the issue of auditing the gold reserve and finding out just how encumbered it is, in addition to how much gold is really still there, but also whether he will press for answers from Fed Chairman Bernanke and other Federal Reserve officials about what they're doing in the gold market, particularly about these gold swaps. Ron Paul is now in a position, I believe, to pull the plug on the whole scheme. Whether he will do so is a question. I think he, as an ordinary member of the minority of the House Financial Services Committee, I think he was in a pretty good position to pull the plug on it, but he never asked the gold question of Greenspan or Bernanke. Paul is going to be on the spot. I'm hopeful that he will ask the crucial questions in public with the cameras going.
Okay. I know that, GATA is your second job. Your first job is an editor of a paper in Connecticut, and co-founder Bill Murphy is a newsletter writer, and his work in GATA is also his second job. What keeps you going?
Well,
you must be putting in, what, 18 hours a day between both of them?
It's a lot of time, James, and it's really entirely an accident that we got into this, and it was not only an accident, but when we started, we really didn't know what we were into. We thought this was an ordinary antitrust scheme involving some, big private companies, and I think it was really a couple of years before we began to realize, oh, this is, just more gold market rigging by governments, and that there's a long history to it, but the history was not really compiled anywhere. But I happen to think, and I think Bill does as well, that this is the biggest issue in the world. I mean, like I said, it's the question of how all capital and labor and goods and services on planet Earth are to be priced, and who's going to decide what prices are. Are prices going to be determined democratically? Or are they going to be
through the market process?
Through the market, or are they going to be determined in a totalitarian mechanism?
Behind closed doors.
Yes, and this is, as far as I'm concerned, it's the issue of 1776 all over again.
Okay, I see it that way as well. In terms of the conference that we're going to be having tomorrow, is this just part of the general educational effort to get more people aware of GATA? The reason why I asked that, there are going to be a lot of people watching this interview for the first time, believe it or not, haven't heard of GATA. Even though you've been around for 10 years and your reach is growing all the time, I'm sure there are going to be some people that are just now learning about GATA and its efforts. What kind of message would you like to convey to them? What kind of message are you going to convey in the conference tomorrow?
I'm going to try to present documentation at the conference to show people that this is not conspiracy theory, that the gold price suppression scheme is public record that has gone back for 50 years and is contemporaneous even today. I'm going to urge them to ask some questions of their own. I think Ned, just talking to you, was hopeful of getting people to ask questions and look at things in a different light. I think anybody who looks at this issue and is willing to look at the documentation will realize there is an enormous interest in government in suppressing the gold price. And there's enormous evidence that this suppression is being undertaken through various mechanisms today. Some very profound investment conclusions can be drawn from this information. But we're looking to spread the word to some influential people. London is, big financial center in the world. It is also a center of the gold price suppression scheme, and there's a lot of smart people in London. And London is also, James, the city from which civilization, the rescue of civilization was arranged in the 1940s. This country is more heroic than it may realize, and I think more capable of doing the right thing. And I'm very excited about the opportunity to reach a London audience.
Yeah, it's very thrilling to be speaking in the Guildhall, which
Yes.
itself dates back to 1400. So you've got to imagine that Sir Isaac Newton, who created the classical gold standard, had walked through that Guildhall probably many, many times, either before he was the master of the mint or perhaps when he was master of the mint. So it's all quite exciting. Do you think that we're headed towards some kind of a monetary train wreck, given the fact that governments have so abused the market process?
I don't know how the current financial system is going to survive. So many things are just fictions. Things are being papered over left and right. I have suspected for a few years that central banks will get in front of this problem by mobilizing gold back into the financial system. I don't really expect a gold standard, and I don't advocate a gold standard. I advocate a free market in the monetary metals, because I think that will accomplish the objectives of a gold standard better than the gold standard itself would. But I will not be surprised if we wake up some morning or turn on the nightly news before going to bed some Sunday night and find out that the G8 or the G20 or the IMF or some of those guys have been meeting, if not at the Plaza Hotel in New York, as they did in 1985, have come to some new currency arrangement. And perhaps they will announce that central banks will start buying gold at $5,000 an ounce, perhaps in the name of helping the poor countries where gold is mined, or perhaps very candidly in the name of reliquefying central banks themselves, those that still have sufficient gold reserves to reliquefy themselves with. I believe it was Lyle Gramley, a former member of the Fed's Board of Governors. If it wasn't him, it was another former member of the Fed's Board of Governors who was on Business News Network in Canada a year or two ago when he was getting hit with pretty serious criticism of the deterioration of the Fed's balance sheet. It's, you know, taking all this crappy paper to rescue various financial institutions. And Gramley, or the Fed governor, whoever it was, volunteered to the reporter that he was overlooking something, and that what he was overlooking were the 8,000 tons of gold on the books of the United States government, on the books of the Fed, that were being valued only at the antique price of $42.22 an ounce, and that if there was a market revaluation of this gold, Gramley said, the Fed's balance sheet would look immensely better. Well, this was something that was volunteered by a former member of the Fed's Board of Governors. It signifies that, you know, maybe the Fed thinks about gold a lot more than we do. Gold revaluations have been used in the past for national reliquefations. Roosevelt did it back in 1933 and 1934. A British economist named Peter Millar a few years ago wrote a paper on how the revaluation of gold has been used throughout history to avert debt deflations and reliquefy the financial system. I'm pretty confident it's going to happen again, and I just want to live so long to see it.
Yeah, I just want to remind viewers that when you talk about a revaluation of gold, the other side of that coin, of course, is a devaluation of the currency against which gold is being revalued, which means the currency is going to be purchasing less than gold would be doing. To wrap up, let's just talk a little bit about, you know, GATA and how people can help. I know you're a nonprofit organization and you do accept donations from the public to keep, you know, GATA funding for trips when you're speaking at conferences, paying for attorneys for the Freedom of Information Act. Can you tell the viewers a little bit about how they might be able to help and contribute?
GATA is a Delaware corporation. We were incorporated in January 1999. We're a nonprofit tax-exempt corporation under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code in the United States. Contributions, financial contributions to GATA are federally tax-exempt in the United States. If you live outside the United States, I'm afraid I can't help you there.
But people from outside the United States, of course, can make donations to GATA.
Yes, we accept donations you know, by check, by credit card, and by GoldMoney. If people want to go to our internet site, www.gata.org, in the left column of that internet site is a little icon for, you know, how to help us, and we are most grateful. If you want to send us $5, you'll be sending us more than most of the major mining companies have.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you.
It's all mine.
Thank you.